I've been painting for many years, and I've taught students how to watercolor paint, and I've had art in art shows, and plan to pursue a career in art, which is why today I'm going to demonstrate to you how to watercolor paint, including the materials needed, the procedures, and the result. The first thing you're going to need to do is gather all your materials. You need 3 brushes, small, medium, and large, watercolor brushes. The watercolor because they're natural hair and they hold more paint. A palette to hold the paint, a lunch tray works. Watercolor paper, it's thicker and the water doesn't wrinkle the paper. Watercolor paint come in tubes or in a tray. And finally, water. This is a basic watercolor exercise that Ms. Torkson teaches all of her Art 1 students. The first step is to divide the paper into 2. The first thing I'm going to teach you how to do is a wash. The key to a wash is a lot of water and not a lot of paint. I'm going to use the water in the tray, and you have to make sure you have enough to do the entire wash because you have to work fast to make sure that there's no lines. A wash may not be very dark, but sometimes it can be. Again, you have to work very fast so that there's no lines. Now, while the wash is still wet, take more paint. Never go right from the paint tray to the paper. Always put it in the palette first to make sure you have the right color. You're going to take wet paint to wet paint and see what happens. The colors bleed together because they're both wet. The second thing we're going to do is draw 2 shapes, one inside the other. First, we're going to paint the inside shape, staying in the lines as much as possible. And it's key to use the right size brush so that there are no lines. Now, you can't paint the outside shape yet because the inside paint is still wet and they would bleed together. So, we're going to do the line exercise, where you take each size brush, small, medium, and large, and get the biggest line possible and the smallest line possible. Get the smallest line the same size for each brush if you're properly controlling the brush. You have to use the very tip of the brush for the small line and push all the way to the ferrule of the metal part of the brush to get the biggest line. Now that the inside shape is dry, we can paint the outside shape so that they don't bleed together. Now for the results. You should be able to get clean lines, no lines in the wash, and the same size lines for all brushes if you are properly using them. In conclusion, using these basic techniques demonstrated in the watercolor exercise, you should be able to paint just about any watercolor painting.
As time began to burn, like a startling sign that fate had finally found me. and your voice was all I heard.